welcome to Arab Center, Washington, D.C., to our expert interview series with a special guest of honor today, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi. Dr. Ashrawi does not need an introduction, but for the sake of formality, I will go ahead and mention some of the highlights of her achievements, and then we will proceed with the art of conversation to try to focus on events in the region pertaining to the ongoing war in Gaza and its implications locally for the Palestinians, but also regionally and internationally. Dr. Hanan Ashrawi is a distinguished Palestinian leader, legislator, activist, and scholar who currently serves as chairperson of the Board of Trustees of Birzeit University, the most prestigious Palestinian university based in the occupied West Bank of Palestine. Dr. Ashrawi came to international prominence, as many of you know, as a member of the Leadership Committee and spokesperson for the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace process beginning in Madrid in 1991. She was appointed a few years later, in 1996, as the Palestinian Authority Minister of Higher Education and Research, and she resigned from that post, some of you might remember, in protest at the non-implementation of reform plans in governance and peace talks. Prior to that, she also served as Dean of the Faculty of Arts at Birzeit University. Dr. Ashrawi was elected to the Palestinian Legislative Council, the legislative body of the Palestinian Authority, representing Jerusalem back in 1996, and made history as the first woman to hold a seat on the executive committee of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, in 2009. She subsequently resigned from that position in December 2020, citing the need for renewal and reinvigoration within the Palestinian political system. Dr. Ashrawi received both BA and MA degrees from the American University of Beirut, and a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, in Medieval and Comparative Literature from the University of Virginia in the United States. Moreover, she is the recipient of 11 honorary doctorates from universities in the US, Canada, Europe, and the Arab world. Dr. Ashrawi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Khalil. It's good to be with you again.
As we look today at events in Gaza and throughout the region, it seems to me that this is an unprecedented and very, very difficult times throughout Palestine, specifically since this war of vengeance, if you don't mind calling it as such, being waged by Israel on Gaza, starting back in October 7. Would you mind starting this conversation by giving our audience your own personal assessment of the past 6 weeks from your vantage point in Ramallah?
Well, you can say this is unprecedented in many ways, in the fact that it's viciousness, it's bloodiness, it's total disregard for human lives. Its total criminality in many ways is something that has shaken the whole world. But actually, it's not something new in terms of Palestinian history, because this is precisely reminiscent of what happened to the Palestinians in 1948, 47, 48, or the Nakba that accompanied the creation of the State of Israel on Palestinian land. And as you remember, Palestine was created as a result of several massacres, massacres that are now also being revealed in terms of the whole towns, whole villages being massacred or eradicated. 500 villages were totally razed to the ground because there was an attempt at the what is called the displacement and replacement, the displacement of a whole population, its history, its culture, its reality, its demography, its geography, and replacing it with another people, and claiming the land, including, of course, naming of places and the history and the culture. So this ethnic cleansing began with the creation of the State of Israel. And along with that process of ethnic cleansing, you have a process of the negation of Palestinians, of the vilification of Palestinians, of rendering them invisible or dehumanizing them and demonizing them, and the process of Israel being given preferential treatment with no accountability or intervention or any kind of costs for what it's doing to the Palestinians. So here you have total impunity with Israel and a process of preferential treatment and no accountability. And you have with the Palestinians a process of labeling, of dehumanizing, and so on. And along with that, the horrific Nakba, which is as I said, the razing of whole villages, the mass destruction, the massacres of Palestinians. And we always thought of the Nakba as a continuum, so to speak, that the saying, the myth of a land without a people for a people without a land is not a reality, an expression of reality. It's an agenda for the fundamentalist Zionists, that they want to take over Palestine without the people and superimpose on historical Palestine all of greater Israel. And this is a chapter. This is a very, very destructive and painful and shocking and horrific chapter. But it is part of a continuum as well. And it exposed several faults, several faults that maybe have lain hidden for a while. People tended to forget the nature of fundamentalist Zionism, tended to forget the fact that Palestinians are still under occupation, that we do have three levels of oppression, whether the people who have been expelled, the refugees who have been exiled, or the people who are living under an apartheid system of racism and oppression in 48 Palestine, what became Israel, or the people in the West Bank and Jerusalem and Gaza who came under occupation in 1967. So the Palestinians are suffering from a multiplicity of injustices.
One gets the impression from the Western coverage that as if the history you're referring to started on October 7. It's been so frustrating to bring to the attention of the media, of officialdom, of public opinion, the fact that you said this is part of a continuum. Is that felt in Palestine?
Of course. I mean, all of us, individually and collectively, suffer the trauma, an ongoing trauma of a collective memory of the mass expulsions, the uprooting and dispossession and expulsion of Palestinians, the massacres of Deir Yassin, of Qasim, of Tantura, how innocent Palestinians were just totally massacred by Israeli and Jewish militias. These are things that are part of our, not just history, but maybe our unconscious or subconscious, or if you want, even conscious trauma. It's an ongoing oppression. But what makes it worse is the fact that this is ongoing, that Israel has enjoyed preferential treatment, has been rewarded rather than punished, has been allowed to act as a rogue state with total criminality and without any kind of intervention or curbs, while the Palestinians have been dehumanized, and now more so, and even reduced either to numbers or to a strategic threat to Israel or a demographic threat to Israel or whatever, not even acknowledging the nature of our reality, of our culture, of our history, and also of our pain. Israel claimed a monopoly on pain and suffering. Israel claimed a reality that we had nothing to do with, by the way, but the Palestinians are paying the price for it as the only victim, and therefore a victim that has total license to do whatever it wants to the Palestinians. And we saw this very clearly when in October 7, immediately all sorts of labels came out. Netanyahu started talking about the Holocaust. Well, excuse me, the Palestinians have had nothing to do with the Holocaust. This is a Western, a European, a Christian phenomenon. The Palestinians actually were the people who had taken in the Jews who were being massacred by the Europeans in Europe. He tried to make that false analogy again, then started making the analogy with ISIS. These are ISIS. Hamas is again, Hamas has nothing to do with ISIS and has a different ideology and a different mindset. And it is a local Palestinian resistance movement. Whatever you think of it, you may agree, you may disagree, but it has political and military wing, and it has institutions. And we try to explain to people not to define the Palestinians constantly by how the Israelis try to label them or stereotype.
Yes. Yeah, so, Hanan, you did mention the West Bank. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Help us understand what's happening in the West Bank. How did that become like a second front in this war?
Well, it has always been a front because it has always been targeted by Israel. Now, a few years back, with the the labor did this in Israel in a gradual way, in a more subdued way, with hints of annexation and so on. With Likud and the right wing, it became more obvious. But then when Netanyahu, for his own personal obsessive drive, and reason not to go to jail, that's his only motivation. He doesn't want to go to jail. He went to bed with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and all these extreme hyper-nationalist, religious fundamentalist fascists, really. And he formed this coalition that speaks openly about ethnic cleansing, openly about expulsion of Palestinians, openly about Palestinians being non-human or subhuman, advocating mass murder.
Talking about his own version of ISIS.
Exactly, that's what he has. He has the Israeli Jewish ISIS in his coalition. Exactly. And this became a matter of policy. I remember the days when settlers were outside the mainstream. They were considered, beyond the pale. They're extremists. Now they are in the government and they are taking decisions based on a sense of their own superiority and rights, based on a very narrow fundamentalist exegesis of the Bible interpretation, based on their own. There's a bloodlust, a bloodthirst when they go out and demonstrate death to the Arabs. Muhammad is this, Muhammad is dead, we'll burn you alive, you need another Hawara, you need another pogrom. The Nakba is coming back. They say it openly. They want to massacre and destroy and take all the land. And they are in government now. So this government intensified and escalated all these policies that were taking place gradually. It's not that they were not there. They were there, but they were taking place gradually in a subdued way. The annexation, the expansion of settlements, the settlers gradually becoming more and more powerful, being more armed and so on. Now it's out in the open. The settlers are being armed and they're being unleashed on mainly rural, vulnerable areas and societies and villages and farmers, and they are destroying crops, uprooting trees, burning people's homes, shoot to kill policy. They're armed, and you have pictures of Ben-Gvir, issuing machine guns to these settlers. So settlers became the weapon of choice of this government. And the army not only protects them, but it helps them. Yes, it arms them and helps them. And then you have the army. It's a matter of policy that the army comes in, they destroy infrastructure, roads, and so on. They raid mainly refugee camps, but villages and other places. They destroy your roads, your electricity, your water tanks, and so on. They have carried out ethnic cleansing in the south, in Masafiriata and other places where there are whole communities are being ethnically cleansed. This has come to a head. The shoot to kill policy has become very clear. Extrajudicial execution. They shoot to kill. I mean, since October 7, they've killed more than 200 Palestinians in the West Bank. They have arrested over 2,500. And the way they arrest people is just incredible. They enter your home at night, they terrorize the whole family, they drag you, they beat you up. I mean, there's a video of one daughter crying because the army is beating, the soldiers are beating her father in front of her, and she's crying and she's asking, and while they're beating him and stomping on him, and so they're telling her to shut up and yelling at her. I mean, what kind of memory? And this is a very, very small example of how they do it. There are films in which the army now is bragging about how they humiliate and torture Palestinian prisoners, our abductees. They strip them naked, they drag them, they blindfold them and tie them up, they stomp on them, they beat them with the butts of their guns.
Reminiscent of Abu Ghraib. We've seen some pictures.
Yeah, it's
unbelievable.
Yeah. It's worse than Abu Ghraib, yeah, because some of them died. We have 5 who died in detention in the last couple of weeks. There is a deliberate, cruel inhumanity and torture, in addition to the strategic aim of annexing the West Bank, of silent transfer. As they're saying now we need transfer. This applies to the West Bank the way it applies to Gaza. The refugee population of 1948, and Gaza, 75% of it are refugees from 1948 who are in Gaza. So now they want them to become refugees one more time, to expel them from this small part of Palestine. And the same thing in the West Bank. Now they tell them, we will, Shamir said this, but he said that we will prolong negotiations and we will build more settlements until the talks become meaningless, and we will annex all of the West Bank. So the annexation policy has always been there, but the way in which it is being implemented, and now under the guise of this war on Gaza, they are carrying out the silent transfer in the West Bank. Shamir said, we will make life impossible for the Palestinians, so they will leave of their own will. This is the silent transfer. It's not just the bringing in of Israeli settlers to take over everything, but also the expulsion, either by force and by terror and by killing and so on, or by making life unlivable for them. And they tried this with Gaza for years, for decades. 16, 17 years of total siege. And the Gazans didn't leave. And the Gazans didn't surrender. And that in the West Bank, you see our lands being stolen, our livelihood being, our resources being, you see our kids being detained, arrested, beaten up, killed, and so on. And people are determined they will stay, they will not leave.
Hanan, can we talk a little bit about the day after? I mean, everybody right now seems to be focusing on sooner or later. Israel is exhausting its talent. I have a disagreement with that. They have plenty of talent in terms of further bloodletting and killing. But it seems like people are saying within few weeks, Israel, because of public opinion worldwide turning against it, public opinion in this country turning against it, thousands of people within the administration, employees of the administration, the past few days, this week, basically sent letters and objecting to the policy and the way it is being conducted, articulated, and implemented by President Biden. So the pressure seems to be on maybe a ceasefire of some sort in the near future. And people are beginning to talk about what's next. There are even some people in the administration have the goal, after all this destruction, to talk about somehow raise the Palestinians from under the rubble and talk about the possibility of a peace process, of a two-state solution all over again. For you and me, it's ridiculous, but could you convey that to our audience? Why is it hypocritical and ridiculous?
It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's going to take a long time to explain that, because I'm really worried at the obtuseness of people who are in government, who take decisions, and who refuse to have not just a critical distance from themselves and understand, but who refuse to understand the region, the nature of the dynamic within the region. They don't understand cultural imperatives. They don't even understand religious identities. They just seem to think that all you need to do is think that everybody thinks like they do, and that's it. They don't understand the deep wounds that the Palestinians have. They don't understand the sense of supremacy and entitlement that Israel has, and the violence that has become inherent. They don't understand that you have allowed Israel to destroy your program of a two-state solution while you sat back and watched it and encouraged it and provided it with cover to act with full impunity.
And paid for it.
And paid for it, exactly. And in that sense, they created a state, an entity, a state, whatever you want to call it, that has become so arrogant that it thinks it can get away with everything. And this type of complacency has led to the horror of ethnic cleansing and genocide and massacres and so on. Nobody will hold them to account. Now, if you say you're going too far, the way now people of conscience are waking up in the West and in the US, there are people in the administration who also believe in human rights and rule of law, and there are regulations governing behavior in times of war and so on. People are waking up and are challenging and questioning. Israel is shocked. How dare you? But look, the Holocaust. But look, the October 7th. But look, these guys are horrific. We insist there was a woman who was raped. Okay, you have evidence. So a woman was raped. This is horrible. And we are all objecting to the raping of women, especially as women. But does that give you the right to destroy all of Gaza? 1.5 million people dispossessed, without homes, without shelter, without food, without water. Only 0.7 are still in their land, in their homes. And we don't know for how long. And they also don't have food and water and electricity and internet. What kind of horror are you doing? Are you committing?
And how does that justify the 5,000 almost children that have been killed as a result? I mean, it's bloodletting for the sake of bloodletting.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a sense of, revenge on the rampages. Yeah. You have close to 5,000 children. You have close to 4,000 women who were killed and shelled and bombs. And we see these horrific images every day, every day. Frankly, Khalil, I cannot sleep at times. And I find myself crying suddenly. I mean, here I am.
You're not the only one. I mean, a lot of people all over the world. Yeah.
So much pain, so much killing, willful death. Like the picture of this old man, and they came and what did they do? They gave him something. And then when he turned around, they shot him. When the cameras went there, so they shot him in the back. They do that. Or they gave, anyway, this is a propaganda war of enormous magnitude and immorality and inhumanity. So there are so many wounds now that to sit down and talk dispassionately and calmly about the day after, we don't know what the day after will show. We don't know whether all of Gaza will be totally razed. This is one thing Netanyahu spoke about. He wants to turn Gaza into rubble, and he's doing it. Really, that's the one thing you can believe him. Everything else he lies. First he said he wants to turn Gaza into rubble. Then he said he wants to destroy Hamas. Then he said he will destroy all the military capabilities of Hamas. Then he remembered there are hostages. We have to rescue the hostages. Then he said, no, I mean, everything they say shows that they do not have any clear thinking about the situation, about where they're heading and what they're doing, and what kind of dynamic and what kind of pain and revenge and horrible conditions they are creating, not just in Palestine, throughout the world. Israel, for the first time, has shown its dark side to the rest of the world. The rest of the world now see what we have been seeing. In the region, the Arab countries, Arab leaders who are allies of the US are telling them, you're embarrassing us with our own people. Of course, you can count on lack of democracy for a while, but sooner or later, the Arab leaders know they have to listen to their people who are also traumatized and shocked and offended and who are crying. You have to listen to the hundreds of thousands in Europe, in the US, who are saying this is not how business is done. So the exposure of Israel, despite the frantic attempts by Biden and Clinton and Blinken and Hillary Clinton, of course, and others trying to justify what Israel is doing, they really have become hysterical in many ways. The world is seeing what's happening. There is no mainstream media, CNN and others, who are also justifying this. But there is social media. There are people who are witnessing events. There are images and films and so on. We don't need to prove because it is there. Nobody is manufacturing proof the way the soldiers do on the spot. Or we're not talking about lies. We're talking about reality. Yeah. This has become apparent. So a new dynamic is emerging. And this dynamic will have ramifications not just within Palestine, Israel, and not just within the region. I think globally, there is a public outrage. There's an outcry of people of conscience everywhere who say, how can you allow this to happen? Again, there's a re-emergence of the mentality of the white man's burden, the preferential treatment, the white man's superiority, and so on, along with the South and the East versus West, and so on. These fault lines are coming out, and people are questioning alliances. And I don't think the region will be the same anymore. You cannot count on the Americans pretending to be the protectors of regimes in our region, and therefore you have to pay us and you have to do what we tell you to do. There is a sense of also a humiliation. Look, Netanyahu tells them to shut up openly. Don't open your mouth, he tells them.
Yeah.
And look at the resolutions they took in the Arab and Islamic conference. But their people are not happy with those resolutions. And the Americans cannot continue to count on client regimes to maintain quiet. The same way as they cannot continue to count on the PA or whatever security to maintain quiet in the West Bank. There are now new factors involved, new ethos, new attitudes. Yeah. And the US will never have the standing it had, except maybe with a handful of people who count on it. But even its greatest ally and weapon in the region, Israel, proved to be ineffective. When push came to shove, they had to, bring in the American fleet, carriers and troops.
Exactly. When you have to come to the rescue of your garrison state that's supposed to protect your interests in the region, it behooves you to re-examine your policy, doesn't it?
Exactly. And the same with Europe, by the way.
Yep.
The people of Europe are beginning to see, again, the repercussions of a long history of Zionism, of colonialism. Again, the whole issue of anti-Semitism and what it means now when it is translated into not just Islamophobia, but into giving Israel a free pass to do whatever it wants and to use extreme racist, not just language, but actions. I mean, we keep telling people the Holocaust is on you, the West. That's your doing. You have nothing to do with it. Don't project, don't superimpose your guilt on us. We didn't do this. And that's one thing. But so it's not easy to say, okay, they're looking for teeny-weeny practical little solutions. Who's going to govern Gaza next? Well, first of all, let's stop the bombing. Let's stop the killing, the slaughter, the massacres, the outrage. Stop that now. It's not how are we going to save lives? Well, there's nothing left to govern. And who wants to govern? The thing is, like all peoples, Palestinians deserve their own self-determination, their own right to freedom and to dignity. And why is it that the world once again has to decide for us? Who is to come here? Who is to govern? Who can control? Who can contain? We want to get rid of Hamas. Get rid of, let me see you get rid of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who were told that they were terrorists before, the Kahanas, the Kah people, who were, as you know, labeled as terrorists. But no, they decide they have to get rid of Hamas because they were not. And the Palestinians are not very good victims, frankly speaking. We don't like being victims. And we don't behave like victims, and we don't surrender, and we
that
don't
frustrates the other side. I know that.
Exactly. So how are they going to control us? Okay, you may kill anybody who belongs to Hamas, which is very difficult to do because you have to kill 1/3 of the population since they ran for election. You may kill all the militants of Hamas. There are other militants. There are people who believe in nonviolent resistance. There are people who believe in violent resistance or armed struggle. There are people who believe in negotiations. There are people who believe that only through resistance can you regain Palestine. And frankly speaking, Khalil, this whole thing has brought back not just the horror of the Nakba of 48, it has brought back the awareness and the discourse of how Israel was created, of the history of Palestine, of this compound ongoing injustice that the Palestinians have been suffering. So we're back now to 48, not 67.
That's what makes them restless. They don't want anybody to question. They thought it's past. خلاص انتهى. It's over. We don't
over,
need...
yes. Now, what's ours is ours. The UN said, okay, you can have 54% of Palestine. We took, 55% of Palestine. Now we've conquered 77% of Palestine, and we want to take the whole thing. This creeping annexation. But the fact of Palestinian reality, self-determination, nationhood, peoplehood, and the fact that the Palestinians have, I don't want to say prospered, but have lived despite this, and they have advanced in spite of this, and they have had an impact in the world despite all attempts at suppressing them, at killing them, at beating them down, at stealing their lands and resources, at even denying us our narrative and our history and our right. We have persisted. This to me is almost miraculous. And we refuse to lie down and backward, and we refuse to be defeated, as what's his name, Pipes and the son-in-law of Trump, who said that the Palestinians have to be defeated. They have to accept the fact of their defeat. Well, who told you? We are not defeated. We may be under occupation, we may be killed, we may be beaten, your houses may be demolished, we may be expelled, but we don't have the mentality of defeat.
We will accept our defeat when his father-in-law accepts his.
But the thing is, a nation, no matter how much you pummel and you beat and you kill and so on, we have a cause. I told somebody once, we have a cause, they have a spin machine. That's the difference. They can lie, they can manufacture facts, they can bring out as many Bibles as they want. That's not the case, the issue. The issue is you are an oppressor, an occupier acting outside the law, and we are a people with rights, and we will continue to defend them. And we know our identity, we know our history, we know our rights, and we will not relinquish them. That is something that the world does not accept. So it's not the passage of time. It's not how many Palestinians you kill. It's not how you're going to turn Gaza into rubble that will dictate the outcome. What will dictate the outcome, and I'm saying this in broad terms, Khalil, is whether you have reached the decision that the only peace, the only prosperity, the only security in the region will come only when the Palestinians have their rights. And how we define it.
Well said, well said. Let's kind of conclude with this very, very strong point that summarizes, I think, the whole conversation. And let's hope that things would calm down and wisdom will prevail. It's not easy to be hopeful under these circumstances, but we appreciate the fact that you were very generous with your time to help us understand the complexity of the issues that we're going through. Thank you so much, Hanan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Khalil, for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you.